Hey friends, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad that you joined me today. I'm Joanna Whaley. I'm the host of this podcast. Welcome to all my live watchers and listeners who join me each and every week. Those who listen any other time of the week, welcome. Quick backstory if you're new to the show. I'm Joanna Whaley. I'm a former evangelical pastor and I'm a transgender woman. And yes, those things create quite a wild set of stories and circumstances. And today we're going to talk about, because as I'm recording this, we are just days away from this little holiday called Halloween. Okay? And I don't know about you, but I just feel like all my neighbors are getting more and more like intense with their decorations, right? For Halloween. And I remember before I was a trans woman, I was a pastor. And it was like you had these kind of weird feelings about all things Halloween all the time. And I remember like being a pastor and always calling so many things evil, right? We called everything evil. And that's what I want to talk about today. What is evil? Is being queer evil? These are the questions that came up over and over and over again when I was a pastor before I came out as a trans person. And it all centered around this idea, especially around Halloween, when people would say, it's so evil, you can't like let these evil spirits into your life and all these things. And I just remember thinking like, okay, well, it's just like kids getting candy and like movies on TV. What's the big deal, right? Well, then you get these huge theological arguments about it. Here's why Halloween is evil. Here's why all these things you have to like be really careful, right? But then there were so many other things that also were considered evil. Now, for me, as a queer person, I was in the closet when I was pastoring in my big mega churches. And one of the biggest things that I heard over and over again was this idea that if you were queer, you were evil. That anything outside of a heterosexual marriage, yes, even I have to be careful with my live, eggs outside of marriage, translate that if you will for my asynchronous audience. But, anything outside of heterosexuality was considered this like awful thing. And so for me, as a closeted queer person at the time, I didn't know what to do with these things. So like I had so many competing messages of what was evil in the world. And then, okay, stick with me here. And then you add on the subgroups of evil that we taught in my religious practices, right? What are subgroups of quote unquote evil? Well, you can't drink and be a Christian, right? But then all of a sudden, all these like Bible studies with beer started showing up in some of our Presbyterian churches. And then everyone was like kind of cool with drinking, right? Well, you can't smoke. Okay, well, you can't smoke and be a Christian. That's evil. But then mega churches started putting like smoking ashtrays outside of their buildings. Well, I guess we changed our mind on that. Well, you can't swear. You can't have like evil words in your mouth, right? And so swearing was like, oh my gosh, if you even said pissed in church. I remember if I said the word pissed, it was like saying the F word, from the pulpit. But I mean, really, I've been in pastors' meetings where I have never heard the F word more than when I was in some pastors' meetings. I'll be honest with you. And some of the most like spiritual people and some of the most solid people I know swear like sailors. Honestly, they really do. So like what we've made up all these standards of what evil is in the world. So what are we supposed to do with this? Because if you told me that I wasn't supposed to drink, because that's evil, but now you're having beer and Bible study, what other things can we talk about here? What do we do with a same-sex marriage that's loving and like encouraging to them and others and raising children? What do you do with that, right? Is that evil? And sometimes we speak evil. We say things are evil. We point our fingers, especially when I was a pastor, and many people in religious spaces point a finger and call something evil when they are sometimes the biggest perpetrators of it. Let's just call it what it is. Sometimes people will say, that's evil, that's evil. Oh my gosh, this world has gone away from God, or sometimes some of the deepest perpetrators of what I will define in this episode today as evil. And yes, listen, I am a progressive theologian, right? I'm a queer theologian. And yes, I actually do believe there is evil in the world. But it's not quite what I've been taught when I was a young pastor. When I started being a pastor, I was 18 years old when I first got hired by a church, right? And this church kind of taught me everything I needed to know. I didn't go to seminary. They were like, you don't need school. You don't need college. Just drop out of college. You'll be fine. Just work in the megachurch for the rest of your life. You'll be fine. Oops, I'm trans. Don't have a job in the megachurch anymore. So what do? I go study. I go study theology. And the more I became educated in theology, yes, I still understand that there is evil in this world. And yes, so what I'm saying is I'm a progressive theologian who believes in evil in the world. But what is it? One of my favorite theologians, believe it or not, is a Catholic theologian. And he's kind of like the forefather of progressive theology. Highly recommend this book that he wrote. His name is Richard Rohr. He's a priest in New York, and he wrote this book called The Universal Christ. And if you come from Christian traditions, this book will really challenge your faith, because this priest, this Catholic priest, makes the case against original sin. You heard it right. A Catholic priest actually makes an argument against it, and actually floats this concept called, and I've talked about it on my podcast before, called original goodness. You know, original goodness is in our design. I can't help but escape original goodness in my heart and in my theology. This weekend, celebrated two of my kids' birthdays. And for those, I don't talk about my kids a lot anymore on the show, and there's reasons behind that, but it's one of my kids' birthdays today, right? And so I'm filled with this love and joy for my children that, I have it all year, but right now I'm just really reminded of how much my daughters changed my life. And I don't look at my kids. I have never, sure, my kids have flopped on the floor because I won't give them sugar. They have broken things. They have told me that I'm the worst. All of this. It is not pre-recorded, friends. Somebody just said this is pre-recorded. It is not. It is live. I do take calls and answer people that want to have real discussions with me later. But I will actually, got off topic here. I will get questions, and I will get to questions at some point during this today. It just takes me some time to get there, friends. Welcome to the podcast. But with my kids, I have never once looked at them in the middle of a fit. And there was a wild fit last night. A fight, epic 4-alarm fight last night between all three kids. But you know what? I never looked at any of these children and thought, this is because they're evil. Never once have I ever thought that one of my children was born sinful. And let's get super queer on you. when you think, oh, well, like, you know, God's love is a fatherly love and fatherly love sees different things. My kids still call me dad. Yep, that's right. I look like this and they call me dad, which gets really interesting sometimes in certain public environments. But I have never once looked at my children and thought, you are awful, awful human beings. Never once. Original goodness is in your design. It is. Somebody said, you weren't a Christian, you were in a cult. You know what? I do believe that I was a Christian, but I definitely have to confirm that church was totally a cult. Absolutely. Someone else says, I talked with you before, would love to go live with you. Yeah, I mean, I would be happy to chat with you any point during the show. Feel free to chime in. I've got a lot of stuff to talk about, but if you want to talk, feel free. Hit the request to join button. Leave a comment. I would love to interact with you as this show goes on. But just remember this, like, you were not created awful. You weren't. Like, you were created beautifully. And if you come from a Christian tradition, just look at Genesis. Look at the Genesis narrative, right? The Genesis narrative says this, that God created man in his image and saw that it was good, right? Like, that's the reality of the Christian message. It's there, right there. But there's many different thought patterns about what sin is, right? Then you're going to say, well, what about Adam and Eve, right? What about Adam and Eve? You see, there's a lot of different theological frameworks of what sin is. What is sin? What do you do with it? There's so many different frameworks, and one of them, feel free to join the conversation, friends. Leave a comment. Hit request to join. I would love to talk to you about this. But there's kind of like 4 major camps when it comes to sin, right? The first one is the doctrine of the fall, right? We've all heard this if you come from Christian backgrounds, the doctrine of the fall. You got the Adam and Eve, and this whole narrative is very, very patriarchal. It's very much like the guy was just like doing the right thing and like couldn't control his woman. That's like this narrative, right? But what really is happening in the Adam and Eve story is we're kind of trying to let God off the hook for sin. That's one of my professors said that one time, and I loved it. It stuck with me. The fall narrative really lets God off the hook for things gone wrong in the world. And it says that like sin was not part of God's creative act, but human beings were the ones who did it, who sinned. I don't buy it. As a queer theologian, I'm going to tell you the first 3 that I'm going to share with you, I don't buy them. They're not my jam, not my thing. The second one is this humanistic approach to sin. This idea that we're like co-creators, and I do like that idea that we're co-creators, that we were made in the image of God, the imago Dei. You've heard me say that before in the show. And we're made in this image of God, but we aren't a perfect reflection. So what it's saying is that there's something in our design that is wrong. There's something in our design that is imperfect and can't perfectly reflect the love of God outwardly. There's the other one called the self-satisfaction theory. I kind of put a couple things of this theory I call it the self-satisfaction theory. And it's that humans were born like to be self-satisfying. Like, and you hear this narrative preached a lot from like sometimes the church is saying like, look at a 2-year-old. I had a pastor preach this. Look at a 2-year-old. They're flopping on the ground if you like don't give them what they want, right? And it's this whole like you can't be in tune with God without the Holy Spirit. It's this whole like we're kind of garbage without the Spirit of God. And honestly, I still don't buy it. I don't buy that one either. There's a lot of, I'm going to use a big theological term, hermeneutics out there about sin. But the one that I've really loved, the one that I've really, really loved, is this structural and systemic viewpoint of sin. You see, it sees everyone's life. What am I preaching in the South? It sees everyone's life as a gift. It sees every single one as a gift. It sees every human being that walks the earth as valuable. However, sometimes human beings create systems to try and be efficient, right? Capitalism, patriarchy, colonial systems. We create these systems to try and make ourselves more efficient, to sometimes try to play God, right? But these things, these systems begin and they just run, and they fall off track. They fall off track. And they distort the original reality of what it was supposed to be. This idea is that it like living, and you've heard it said like you're living in sin, not you are a sinner, but I actually like the term like you're living inside of a sinful system, like you're operating inside of one. I'm going to tell you what a systemic sin is. Let me point some of them out for you. You hear a lot of times people saying like, oh, if you're lazy, you're going to be broke, and like you don't manage your money well. So like you're living in sin because you don't have like a savings account. I've actually heard that in churches before. I've heard that before. I'm going to submit to you that actually, while I can't control capitalism, right? I didn't design capitalism, didn't choose to live inside of it. But like the greed that happens in our world, we can become victims of that. So if we're somebody who like owns a business and we just keep hiking up prices because we want to impress our shareholders, that is a broken system, and that is a system that has gone wrong in this world, and it is hurting other people. Racism. Thinking that because of your skin color, you're better than someone else, is a broken system. Like gender dynamics. Let's look at the queer community. In the 1950s, there was this whole like picture of what a marriage should look like, of what things should look like, right? But as soon as queer people were like out and proud, they're like, what are you? You don't belong here. You're not part of our club. And we created this system of heteronormativity. And we've said, if you don't fit in this, you're evil. You are a sinner. But I would submit to you that the system that those of us trying to preserve some ideal that doesn't work for everyone is living in a system of sin. That is evil. And we can choose to participate in it or not. I do not, and I'm going to say something a little bit controversial, even for my progressive friends. Even if someone is perpetrating someone against them, I'm really slow and I'm really careful to say that is an evil person. I start asking the questions, what led this person to this place? I see it all the time in some of the professional work I do. I'll be having a conversation with, and it's like, I'm like, my old theology would say that you're just a terrible person. But if I look at how has the systems failed you, I can begin to understand that you didn't set out. You were made originally good, but the system failed you. and you weren't able to keep up with it. Systemic sin is the place where evil lives. It's not in us. It's in the collective failure to take care of one another. It's in the whole, not my problem. Not my problem, I'll let somebody else deal with that, and the problem persists. That's where we failed one another. We have to resist calling human beings evil and call out the systems instead. I believe this with all my heart. We have got to stop calling people evil. And yes, I talked about this on my show before. I have to stop, like, when the whole Donald Trump thing happened, right? Like, when he, like, when they tried to, like, take his life, that guy tried to take his life. I had to stop for a minute and remember that I was talking about a human being. And it had to change my whole perspective. Somebody says, I'm a Republican and I think you're cute. Thank you. Quick story for everybody, since we're on a live podcast here. I think my sister's watching right now, is live with us, but I was out to dinner with, we were out going to a couple bars with my sister one night, and there was this guy in a Trump hat, and I was looking good. I was looking really good. And I'll tell you what, he was like eyeing me up all night. And I was like, if only homeboy knew what was going on. Like, anyways, I felt like the belle of the ball in this like super, super red hat center. It was hilarious. But anyways, that's off topic. But maybe it's not. Here's the thing. Heteronormativity led that guy to potentially vote against my rights. I don't know. I'm not saying that you're evil if you're a Republican. That's not what I'm getting after here. And this is especially really telling and really important for us to talk about as we're literally about to walk into an election. This is really where we can see systemic failure come into play. If we continue to fail one another in supporting each other's life, we failed one another. That is where evil lies in the world. And I'm not talking about Republican and Democrats. I'm talking about all of us. And I especially want to just speak to the queer community right now. You have been told by so many people in your life that who you are, how you identify, is pure evil. And I want to tell you that you were made beautiful on the inside. Yes, the queer person in you is beautiful. Hi, Megan. It's nice to see you. You are made beautiful. And the systems of our world have failed you, even the religious systems that promised to love you unconditionally. The parental systems that have failed you. You've been cut off from your family because you're trans or because you love someone of the same gender. That system has failed you. Whether it's religious, whether it's some kind of ideological system. And here's what you need to hear from me. And I talk with many, many queer people in the closet and newly out and have been out for a long time. I'm going to submit to you, your parents are not evil sinners, but they have been swept up in a fallen, broken system. When we can look at the world like that, when we can look at the world and say, hey, I don't think you're an awful person because of how you vote. Hi, Nathan. Because of how you vote, or what you believe about trans identity, I see you as an original creation that was good, mom and dad. But you are living in an evil system that wants to take away my rights. Ocean something father says sin and for good reason. Not sure what that means. Sins and for good reason? Interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure what that's referring to. Maybe it's in response to, if you watch live, I have like a little prompt on the top that says, is being LGBTQ evil? I'm going to submit to you, no. Maybe you're someone who, right now, you're in the closet, and you're in a marriage with kids. I was there. And you've been told that how you feel is evil about you, and you have to treat it like some kind of, addiction. Maybe you've been going through conversion therapy, but because it might be illegal, it's called reparative therapy or biblical therapy. And you're being told that who you are was some kind of wrong. You are not evil for how you feel and who you are on the inside. I'm speaking right now to the person who is, driving to work, driving to the same job, or driving back home, and their marriage is a disaster because they're in the closet and they can't engage with their life. I'm talking to you. I'm telling you right now that who you are is perfect. Yes, even the queer part of you is perfect, is not evil. You were made good. And I believe with all my heart that you were made queer. I do. I do. I believe it. A lot of people will say to me, as a trans woman, they'll say, you can't change who you are because God made you perfect. It's like saying God made a mistake with you. And I have never once said that. I have never once held that theology that God made a mistake with me. I believe that in my design, I was uniquely given the opportunity to live life as both male and female. And it has been a wild ride. It has not been easy. But ask anybody who has some kind of condition in their life that has to be dealt with. It's not easy, but it's theirs. And they learn within it. And they can see the divine within it. So can you? Can you see the divine within your context? Whether you're out and proud, whether you are an ally, maybe you're listening to me and you're just wondering why there's a trans person in your feed or on your podcasting app right now, and you just don't want to listen to me because I'm queer. I want you to hear me say that I don't think you're a bad person. I think you're actually a good person who can find love and compassion and leave the system of exclusion in your life. I believe that. To the parent out there who is rejecting their child because they came out to them, I don't think you're a terrible person. But I do think it's time to see your child like the divine sees your child, like God sees your child, as perfect. Remember the moment you held your child for the first time and the immense love, the thing you felt that would do anything for your child. And yes, that even means changing your politics and changing your ideology. Maybe